Zimmer.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Thank you, President. Just over 9 months ago, the referendum took place in the UK. Article 50 was triggered last week. At that time, it really sunk home that the separation between the UK and the European Union really was to take place. The time of weapons drawn on both sides, or irresponsible demagogues such as Mr. Farage and others spouting on, has come to an end. That is clearly over. The time has come for us to deal with each other in a measured, respectful and fair way, so as to enable us to reach an agreement which will enable the United Kingdom and the European Union to coexist together. This separation process is making it abundantly clear just how deep and extensive ties are between all the member states. It covers all areas of life. This demonstrates how the 15 months left is an incredibly short time to negotiate this. This makes it necessary for the European Parliament, not just today, or indeed just at the end when we sign the Act of Divorce, also throughout the whole process, the European Parliament has to be actively involved. We have to give our agreement. When the second phase is triggered off, we, the European Parliament, must also be consulted. What are the important factors for us? We believe that above all, the rights of people, the rights of the citizens of the European Union, of all 28 member states, must be given absolute priority. We believe it is important that UK citizens who reside in the UK and vice versa, more than 5 million, plus the 1.8 million people who live outside, we believe their rights should be guaranteed. And we all know very well that we're not just talking about people who are directly affected. We know that this has enormous implications for peaceful coexistence in important regions in the European Union. We specifically welcome that the proposal refers to the Good Friday Agreement concerning peace in Northern Ireland, and it views the situation in Northern Ireland in a comprehensive way. From the very outset, the European Union was both actively involved in negotiations leading to the Good Friday Agreement and a guarantor thereof. For this reason alone, we are duty-bound to ensure that the interests of all people on the island of Ireland must be to the fore of our minds. Here and now, in the 21st century, we cannot allow a new hard border to emerge in the European Union. I never want to see borders in my own country. I never want to see walls and fences going up. What else is important for us? We believe in fundamental rights, in social rights. We believe in all the foundation stones of human dignity. We want to ensure that all those values figure highly in the negotiations. Let me make it clear. The way in which we conduct these negotiations will have a decisive impact on the future of the European Union. We must also ask ourselves how it has been possible for demagogues such as Mr. Farage to turn the tables, to turn public thinking in the UK. The source for Brexit wasn't just domestic problems or catfighting in the Tory party. Another reason was unsolved problems in the European Union. What has happened to the social union? What has happened to social protection, employment protection, the social pillar? What's happened to our promises for more and greater democracy? That's the signal we have to send out to our people. Let us take up arms together. This is the only way that at the end of this process we can come out with a good agreement to the benefit of all people and citizens of the European Union, and I include immigrants and migrants when I say that. Thank you.
For the Green Group and the European Free Alliance, Mr. Lambert.
Grazie, Signor Presidente. Prime Minister May, you inherited a situation you did not create. Yet, you had a choice. And by choosing for the hardest form of Brexit, you chose the most extreme interpretation of the referendum. Doing so, you encouraged all those on the continent as well as on the continent as well as in the UK, from the fringes of the political landscape up to the benches of your own government, who have made grandstanding and threatening their brand of politics. On the one hand, we have those who call for making Britain the world champion of social and tax dumping, or even of starting a war with Spain. On the other hand, we have those who say we should punish the United Kingdom. Have the last 70 years not taught them anything? But Mrs. May, by your own choice, you dug yourself a hole of contradictions. How can you have a hard Brexit without having a hard border in Ireland? How can you, to use your own words, have the freest possible trade in goods and services between Britain and the EU, while you take the UK out of the single market, which allows precisely that? But above all, how can you reconcile a hard Brexit with your own stated desire of a more united UK and your claim to represent every person in the United Kingdom, including the large number of people, especially the young generation, who voted in favour of remaining in the European Union? Resolving those contradictions so as to minimise damage to our citizens must be the objective of the negotiations to come. And if we want common sense and the general interest to prevail, we must ignore those who shout and posture. And I agree with you, Mrs. May, when you say you want to build a stronger, fairer, better Britain. Achieving stronger, fairer and better societies is a goal that many share in this chamber. Delivering this requires us to face the Trumps and the Putins of this world, to tackle climate change, to fight terrorism and organised crime, to find common responses to the global migration challenge, to curb corporate power. And who can believe? Who seriously can believe, when EU citizens altogether represent 7% of the global population on 2% of the land, that any, I say any, of our member states, including the largest, is better equipped to face these challenges on its own? Mrs. May, like it or not, we're in this together. Taking back control, being recognized as global players, requires all Europeans, including Britons, to act together. There's no such thing as absolute sovereignty. In the 21st century, we can only reconquer sovereignty for democracies by sharing it. Mrs. May, you want to build a Britain your children and grandchildren are proud to call home. Let me remind you that as we speak, many of your own citizens are proud to call not just Britain, but Europe home. Let us not let them down. Thank you very much.
Per il gruppo.
On behalf of the EFDD group, the floor goes to Mr. Farage.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it may have taken 9 months, a pretty full gestation, but be in no doubt that last Wednesday was a great historic day when the United Kingdom announced that we were going to become an independent, self-governing, democratic nation once again, an act that has been cheered by hundreds of millions of people all over the world. Now, we've had a little history lesson this morning from Mr. Verhofstadt, but he made one mistake. In 1973, sir, we did not join the European Union. We joined the European Economic Community. And had the British people known that it was intended to get political and take away our ability to govern ourselves, we never would. Now, I'm sorry to say that the response to the triggering of Article 50 has been all too predictable. Already you've made a series of demands that are not just unreasonable, but in some cases clearly impossible for Britain to comply with. You began by telling us that we have to pay a bill, a cool 52 billion sterling, a figure that has clearly been plucked out of the air, effectively a form of ransom demand. What you could have acknowledged is that we've put net over 200 billion sterling into this project, we're actually shareholders in this building and the rest of the assets, and really, you should be making us an offer we can't refuse to go. And the ever-charming Mr Verhofstadt, the Parliament's chief negotiator, in his resolution that we're to vote on later today, tells us that we cannot discuss potential trade deals with anybody else in the world until we've left the European Union. That has no basis in treaty law whatsoever, and it's rather like saying you can't guarantee yourself a dwelling for when you leave prison, and I trust the British government will completely ignore you. And of course, Mr Tusk, who is not with us today, I suspect that he's still crying. He looked pretty tearful, didn't he, after the British ambassador delivered the letter last week. He tells us in his memorandum that any future trade deal must ensure that the United Kingdom is not allowed to have a competitive advantage. This is all impossible, and you add to that the hypocrisy of, on the one hand, saying the EU will negotiate as one, and clause 22 of the Tusk document saying that actually Gibraltar, that the Spanish can have a total veto over the whole trade deal if they're not happy with the sovereignty of Gibraltar. We believe in national self-determination. Your aim and ambition is to destroy nation-state democracy. Gibraltar is clearly a deal-breaker on current terms. You have shown yourselves with these demands to be vindictive, to be nasty. All I can say is thank goodness we're leaving. You're behaving like the mafia. You think we're a hostage. We're not. We're free to go. We're free to go. And 85, and now I do understand.
Onorevole Farage.
I do understand.
Onorevole Farage.
Sorry, Mr Farage. Listen, I'm trying to give you the chance to speak and say everything you want to say. But if you're talking about the mafia, you're saying this Parliament is behaving like the mafia. As far as I'm concerned, that's unacceptable.
I do understand. I do understand, sir, Mr President, I do understand national sensitivities. I'll change it to gangsters. All right? And that is how we're being treated. We're being given a ransom note. But what must be very difficult for all of you to get into your minds is there is a bigger world out there than the European Union. 85% of the global economy is outside the European Union. And if you wish to have no deal, if you wish to force us to walk away from the table, it is not us that will be hurt. Do you know, we don't have to buy German motor cars. We don't have to drink French wine. We don't have to eat Belgian chocolate. There are a lot of other people that will give that to us. A return to tariffs will risk the jobs of hundreds of thousands of people living in the European Union, and yet what you're saying is you want to put the interests of the European Union above that of your citizens and your companies. And if you continue with that route, it won't just be the United Kingdom that triggers Article 50, there'll be many more to come.
On behalf of the Europe of Nations and Freedoms Group, Mr de Graaf.
Mr. President, I send my congratulations to Ms. Theresa May, to the United Kingdom and the British people. And I say to them, you have regained your freedom and your sovereignty by invoking Article 50, by leaving the European Union. You have now regained the opportunity to flourish as a nation, to control your borders, to make your own laws, to make your own trade deals. The bureaucrats from the EU will try to make you pay about 60 billion. They'll try to force you to comply with all EU directives and standards, and to accept hundreds of thousands of migrants, to accept even the rulings of the European Court of Justice. They will try to open an Ireland road for migrants to the UK. I say to you, don't give in to these demands. You're far better off outside the EU, a union which is going the way of more and more isolation. And they are calling you friend here, friend. But they want to punish you and make you bleed. Let me therefore remind you of the famous words of Sir Winston Churchill: "We shall defend our island, whatever the costs may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." God bless the United Kingdom.
La parola all'onorevole.
The floor goes to Mr. Wolf on behalf of the non-attached members.
Thank you, Mr. President. As Brexit negotiations begin, it is a joy to watch the towering masters in the art of EU diplomacy in full flow here today. Those like Mr. Weber, whose bellicose, threatening and theatrical words no doubt entertain this chamber, but are like a pen with no point in the negotiating rooms. He said on his recent tour of the British media that politicians who fought for Brexit were allowed to grow up in a free Europe and that the UK should now pay more. Well, Mr. Weber, may I remind you that the freedom that you say you promote came at a mighty cost to Britain. It came in the blood and sacrifice of millions of Britons, those who, like my grandfather, when asked, unhesitatingly fought in the sands of Africa so Europe can be free. It came in the 120 billion it cost Britain to fight a German dictator. It came in the 5 trillion Britain contributed to NATO to help build a shield of freedom around Europe from communism. It came on the 500 billion or more we have contributed to the EU and the billions more we spend each day, more than we receive. Mr. Weber, on Radio 4 you asked, "Mrs. May, please tell me what leaving the EU means." Well, I will tell you. It means we are leaving a European Union that has forgotten the costs and sacrifices Britons freely gave to ensure you are free to exercise your diplomacy of the defeated in this chamber of the forgetful. Thank you.
A nome del Consiglio prende ora la parola.
On behalf of the Council, Ian Borg.
Grazie, Sir President.
Thank you, Chair. Members, President of the Commission, Mr. Barnier. As many said last week, finally the notification letter arrived in the hands of Mr. Tusk, and we saw the reaction of the European Council to this notification. As you all know, a few hours later, President Tusk met also the presidency, the rotating presidency of the Council, and we could see the first reactions from that meeting. Now, although a few have referred to the 29th of March as a historic day, I think such discussions and debates like we're holding today should in fact be held, and we should have non-historical debates, and everyone should be free to voice his opinion on this separation with the UK. And I think the only positive outcome will be possible if we keep in mind the best interests of European citizens, of European businesses. And we also need to work to reduce the negative impact that there can be. We know that this is a loss for the Union, and it's a loss for both parts, and it is crucial to minimize negative impacts on European citizens. And thus we can reach a balance between rights and obligations. The European Council's position following the letter by Prime Minister May has been published, and I believe that was the first step we took to show that the 27 member states are united and they just have one unified message about this situation. It is crucial now that we keep this unity in the coming weeks until the guidelines are adopted by the Council, and in the light of this we can work all together as one union. As you know, there will be a Council meeting on the 29th of April, during which we will agree on the guidelines for negotiations. So I think it's a good thing that we are discussing here today. It's a very good moment to voice our opinion on the negotiations. I would like to remind you that even the Prime Minister of Malta, when he was addressing this Parliament, he had underlined, in fact, how crucial it is that a democratic institution like this is at the heart of the process, is kept at the heart of the process, not only because